My name is Jennifer Kuyrkendall. I'm the Third Circuit representative for the Young Lawyers Division Board of Governors. Today we have the pleasure of bringing you Scott Hawkins, the 2011-2012 President of the Florida Bar. Today, Scott is going to be speaking with us about time management skills. Hi, Scott, and welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you actually suggested this topic of time management. Why do you think that is such an important topic for young lawyers?
I know of no senior lawyer who's been effective in his or her career who does not know how to effectively manage time. So I want to present that as an overriding principle. When I was an economics student at the University of Florida, I studied a book titled How to Get Control of Your Time and Your Life by Alan Lakin. The basic premise that Professor Lakin put forth was, if you want to get control of your life, you need to get control of the elements of your life, and that comes down to time. If you want your life to count for something, you need to focus your time on the most important things. I put it in those basic terms because my experience has been that it's very easy for young lawyers to just bounce through the day dealing with what appears to be most urgent, and they end up focusing on what's urgent in contrast to what's most important. So I think as a fundamental operating value for succeeding in this business as a professional, one needs to really understand how to manage themselves, and that primarily comes down to how to manage their time. To be very precise about it, you need to have a good sense of what you need to get done, and you need to have that sense on a daily basis and on a weekly basis. And you need to constantly evaluate whether you have allocated enough time for the most important items. In my experience, most people do not allocate enough time for things that are really important. So they underallocate time, and that leads to false deadlines, or it leads to deadlines and pressures that they could have managed around had they paid more attention. So I'm a firm believer in this. I've seen many a young lawyer get into a situation saying, I wish I'd planned better. Well, that's really what time management is about.
Are there other skills that you would recommend for young lawyers?
Well, it's real basic, actually. I think, first of all, you need to develop a habit of vigorously protecting your time. It's very, very tempting with being bombarded with emails and texts and so forth that you can literally bounce from item to item and essentially dribble your time away. You need to guard against that. So a few things I recommend. I recommend, number one, that you have a weekly to-do list, and that in that list you determine those items which are most important, which are important, and which are less important, and that you allocate your time so that you're focusing on the most important items first and foremost. Then I recommend you have a daily list, and the daily list should implement the weekly list. And the daily list is an interesting tool because you will sometimes have opportunities to move an item from day 1 to day 5 because something that's happened in a case. Maybe a deposition has canceled or a hearing is canceled, and suddenly you've got more time and you can slide something into that slot. If you don't have a list system, and I know this sounds really basic, but if you don't have a list system, the tendency is to lose track of the most important things that need to get done. I also recommend, frankly, having a look on a quarterly basis at what needs to get done. That's very important in trial work, kind of mapping out what needs to be done by certain deadlines so that you're prepared for your trial. Got your jury instructions done on time. You got your dispositive motions done on time. You got to work backward and figure out, well, what do I have to get done to get those items done? If you're not thinking that way, you will get overwhelmed in the business of law because you will lose track. There are all sorts of different strategies that people employ. I basically use a pad, and I have a daily entry sheet and I have a weekly entry sheet. And as I go through my day, I assign A, B, and C items to the matters. I know it sounds really elementary, but it works. And then if something suddenly becomes a C when it was an A, I change it and I focus on the remaining A items first and foremost. Another thing that I recommend is trying to break projects into subsets. Take, for example, you got to write a large motion for summary judgment. You should sit down way in advance of your target date and break out what are the things I need to have done and by when. What depositions do I need to take? What affidavits do I need to gather? What discovery do I need to complete with interrogatories or RFPs? What research do I need to do? Can I assign some of this research out? Will that be a way to help facilitate getting this done? If you're not thinking that way, and it's kind of, you got to back calculate from where you want to be, you got to work backward to figure out what you got to do, you will not get your project done on time with the level of excellence that you're seeking. It's just you get overwhelmed with the pressure of trying to work under a deadline. I see that happening a lot with young lawyers. Another item I want to stress to young lawyers that I've seen quite a bit has to do with the basics of receiving and managing assignments. A few things I'd stress. When you get an assignment from a senior lawyer, make sure you understand it. And I recommend you restate the assignment so that the senior lawyer can understand what you understand the assignment to be. I recommend that you try to get an estimate of time that the senior lawyer expects you to take. And I suggest that you get the senior lawyer to make a commitment, not just, we'll take whatever time you need or spend a few hours. Do you want me to take 2 hours, 3 hours? Can you give me a better sense? I also recommend that you try to have an interim status appointment with the senior lawyer to go over what you've looked at, what you've done, how you see the problem, whether you've learned of anything during the interim period that may help modify or improve the assignment, perhaps a new theory of liability or a new defense claim, whatnot. And that's a way of getting a sense from the senior lawyer whether he or she thinks you're on track. That's a real issue. A lot of things get misunderstood in this business between the assignment giver and the assignment taker. I see it over and over and over again. It comes down to basic communication. But the interim step that I just talked about is a time management tool for checking on where you're going and what you're doing. And it's a good way to give comfort to everyone. It also, frankly, often leads to a better product because the senior lawyer thinks of things differently when you report back to him or her on an interim basis. They don't like to do it, but I strongly recommend that young lawyers almost insist upon it as a way to help manage the expectation. Now, when you become an older lawyer and you're assigning work out to a younger lawyer, I recommend you flip it around and you do basically the same thing. You say, Jennifer Kuyrkendall, here's the assignment. I'd like to meet with you on Friday at such and such time to go over what you've done at that point in time. I want to see your draft, and let's assess it at that juncture. That's a way you can manage your own schedule and make sure the work is getting done in the way expected by you as a senior lawyer. A few more things I recommend. I recommend if you've got a staff person you rely upon, that you try to schedule regular time to meet with that person every day. Give that person 10 or 15 minutes to go over all the open items that person has regarding your schedule or her schedule, whatever the situation may be. I've learned, I did some work with Nora Bregman, who's a coach at Atticus, and she strongly emphasized your staff needs to have that time. And she's absolutely correct, and it's been something I've endeavored to employ. And it's amazing how much you can cram into 15 minutes if everybody can plan on that set-aside time to deal with it. I also recommend with emails that you try to resist the urge to respond to every email or text right away. Emails create a false sense of importance, a false sense of urgency. They often are not that important. It's frankly often beneficial from an organic standpoint to take time to think about your response and not fire off a response. I recommend, it's hard to do this, but I recommend that for general email traffic that wouldn't be of an emergent nature, that you try to respond a couple times a day to what's built up. 10 o'clock in the morning is an example, and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Fire off your responses in mass. It's a lot more efficient, and just say, I'm not going to worry about the response until I get back to it at 10 o'clock the next day. I know that sounds unrealistic, but you can eat up a lot of useless time or use your time in a less efficient manner if you're just responding all day long to stuff coming in. That's my own read.
No, certainly it interrupts your thought process and you just can't
Takes
stay
away
on
from your
task.
client work.
Exactly. You've given us so much helpful information. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
A few quick thoughts. Time management takes time. You should spend time on it. It's not just going to happen because you want it to. I'd spend regular time putting together that list every day. I recommend before you finish your day that you start the list for the next day, because you will know then at 6 o'clock in the afternoon what appears to be the most urgent. I recommend that you read in the area. Atticus is a great source of material on good time management skills. I recommend some books as well, How to Get Control of Your Time in Your Life by Alan Lakin, and The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I recommend that you budget time for taking care of yourself and your family. A productive career stems from a good personal life, in my judgment.
Thank you, Scott. You've been very helpful, and we appreciate you so much for being here to speak with us
Thank
today.
you.